Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Scott Cosenza, Dave Patterson, Graham Noble, and John Klar. And this is The Conservative Five, an online TV production of Liberty Nation News. Long gone are the days of protests simply gone awry. Today it's all about the most pain and suffering intentionally inflicted. A recent poll by Rutgers University found 41% of respondents who self-described as left of center and 29% who described themselves as right of center believe the generalized proposition that the murder of a powerful political leader is at least somewhat justified. When the question turned to Trump and Musk, those numbers jumped to 48% for the world's wealthiest man and 55% for the sitting president. Over the last weekend, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro was the intended target of an assassin when the governor's mansion was set on fire by the use of Molotov cocktails. He was unheard and unbowed. Let's watch part of his presser.
I refuse to let anyone who had evil intentions like that stop me from doing the work that I love, stop me from being a leader of this Commonwealth and looking out for all Pennsylvanians. I will not be deterred in my work, and I will not be afraid to do that work.
John Klar, are we being normalized to violence?
Well, I think we are. I mean, this is a country, though, that some countries in the world would say has a long history of violence. We did have the Kennedy assassinations. We had the recent attempt on President Trump's life there also in Pennsylvania. The statistics you cite, I was doing a little research, and it seems it's not that much different from normal, that there has been this sort of historic, a certain percentage of the population believe violence and even assassination is justified in the name of social justice. I think that's become inflamed. I recently did a piece for Liberty Nation, a little plug there, political extremism and the brain, that literally that people are being put in this dichotomy where they feel that everything's a moral issue and they respond very quickly and viscerally, even to things like a MAGA hat or a Tesla. Look at the violence in Teslas. And so there are some interesting dichotomies here. One is about race. We had the recent case of the young man who stabbed another fellow to death, a white kid, and then claimed it was in self-defense, which, as a lawyer, I will tell you, and Scott will agree, you don't get to escalate violence like that, and it doesn't fly. And yet we see people praising Luigi Mangione for murdering somebody in cold blood and calling for his release. I have not seen AOC or Bernie Sanders condemn this attack, which is interesting because that shows the other dichotomy. You have both far left and far right elements that are anti-Zionist that might be, praising this guy who was clearly a Marxist and a Che Guevara fan and actually called for violence to further political ends. I'm not sure that that's going to do very well, as with the Tesla situation, which, by the way, Bernie Sanders did condemn. So it does seem that political violence is being praised by a certain element in their society. Overall, whether it's escalated or not, it certainly is alarming. And I fear we may see more of it.
Well, harboring hatred, I mean, hatred's a bad word, but it's, I can't imagine hating somebody so much I'd want to blow up their house and their family. I mean, I just don't, I don't see how that is the best step. So, Scott, blowing up a house, a governor's mansion, what does that get him other than on the news?
Well, I'm going to be the fly in the soup, I think, once again on this segment because, I see that this is nothing new. That violence is as American as apple pie. And I can recall when Clinton started coming in and seizing guns and enacting the assault weapons ban in 1994, how the gun ranges had to implement policies to prevent people from putting up Clinton targets at the gun range. It was a violation of policy. There was a common occurrence. Now that doesn't mean that those people would actually, commit the act that people are worried about. But this idea that it's just on the left or more now than it was before, I think is wrong. What I do think has changed is what John Clark said about how these people haven't condemned it. You know, they would have had the mirror would not have been true. So the people, right sort of wing politicians would have had to condemn that because the scene is coming from the right. But we're not seeing that here. It's a celebration or a nothing rather than a let's make sure that everybody knows it's not cool to murder, you know, healthcare CEOs coming from the leadership. And just finally, not that I'm dumping on Mr. Clark, but he used the term anti-Zionist, which I was surprised at. He didn't use the word anti-Semitic. There's anti-Zionism all across the political spectrum. Many people are opposed to Zionism. We don't have to be worried about that. You can be opposed to Zionism all you want, but to be anti-Semitic, I think, is where the hate and murder comes from. And anyway, just wanted to tune into that.
Well, and my point was it's on both the left and the right, because that's what's a little unusual about it. It doesn't define itself on the spectrum so easily.
I've actually noticed
defending myself.
I've actually noticed the use of anti-Zionism, especially on the left, as a cover for anti-Semitism. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to bring it up. It's like they're saying, oh, no, we're not anti-Semitic. We're just anti-Zionist. And of course, for those who know the history of the left, that is not true. The left has long had a troublesome history of anti-Semitism within its ranks.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, this guy, Mr. Balmer, the guy who's sitting in jail, he seemed to hate pretty much everyone. Like, he hated Biden. He called out Trump, according to social media reports. But why Josh Shapiro and his innocent family? I mean, why? Obviously, you know, the timing was pretty suspect, but why do this? Graham.
Well, I think why Josh Shapiro is kind of a good question, because let's face it, Josh Shapiro is not particularly an objectionable character to anybody. I mean, you may not like his politics. I mean, he is without doubt a progressive. I'm not even going to call the guy a moderate. Some of his policy positions are very progressive. However, he's not one of these, raving lunatics. He hasn't completely lost touch with reality. He's capable of rational and sometimes reasonable thought and speech. So of all the politicians you're going to go after, I wouldn't have thought he would have been the one. And of course, when this incident first happened, the motive was not clear. As always happens in these cases, whenever there's kind of a high profile act of violence in this country, people love, and sometimes on both sides of the aisle, people love to jump to conclusions and tie the guy to one side or another. But you're right about this guy. He seems more like a kind of an Antifa type. I'm not saying I've seen any proof or evidence that he's connected to Antifa, but he seems one of those people. It's like just wants to burn down the establishment in general. Since then, it has come out, a warrant was issued, and it's now been reported that in the warrant, the suspect himself admitted to police, or admitted to a 911 dispatcher, apparently, that he did it because of Josh Shapiro, who is, of course, a practicing Jew, and he did it because of Josh Shapiro's stance on Palestine. So that seems to be the motive there. Which again, Scott and John have talked about the fact that, and there is a difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and that there is that kind of sentiment on both sides of the political spectrum, although most of it has always come from the left. They do have, Scott is very much right about that. They do have a very disturbing history of anti-Semitism. So, does it pin this guy on the right or the left? I don't know where this guy is politically. And of course, there is the mental illness factor as well, which often comes into these things. If you're willing to put the politics of it aside, it often comes down to the fact these people are mentally disturbed. After all, if you're going to firebomb a residence that has a family sleeping inside, you've got to be, to a certain extent, mentally disturbed, I would say. But that was the motive. Apparently, as we know it now, the motive was Josh Shapiro's stance on the Israeli-Palestinian issue.
Sarah, before you let Dave in, I want to say that there's another crisis that needs to be addressed, which is the crisis in American education. That a terrorist bomber would think murdering Josh Shapiro would have a meaningful effect on our foreign policy towards Israel. That's another crisis that has to be addressed at some point.
That's a lack of civics right there.
Okay. I get this. But I want to go back to what we were talking about. I mean, Tim Donner wrote a brilliant piece about political violence, and it was in, libertynation.com. You can read it. It was published on Sunday, and it is a very powerful piece. And I kind of wonder if there's something that we're not seeing. That is there a cultural shift here that we're not seeing? Where's this coming from, Dave?
Sir, I'm going to agree with Scott here, that it's neither right nor left, and it's not unusual in American culture to have violence. Lately, that violence has been most prevalent among the far left, but we've seen it in the far right as well. But mostly, currently, anarchists like Antifa and Black Lives Matter have all been engaged in a lot of violence. Now, some of it's ideological for sure, but the vast majority is grievance-centered. Some group of people feel aggrieved and choose to take out their anger on those who generally have little to do with what their grievance is about. And like it or not, our country was formed with the ultimate act of grievance, the Revolutionary War, which worked out well. Some of the more violent expressions of grievances have been labor riots. The Haymarket riot in 1886, for example, in Chicago, was tied to achieving an 8-hour workday. Well, we can be thankful for that, I guess. Anarchists and socialists with the Red Scare in 1919 promoted deportations. Sound familiar? And they were particularly violent. Today, the grievances are unique because they center on mobs that attack the very core principles for which the nation was founded, and that's a problem. Anti-Semitic, pro-Iranian-backed Hamas terrorists, are you kidding, are particularly troubling. But Trump is absolutely right in deporting those embracing terrorists and our guests in the country. I think what it boils down to are the grievances worthy and justified. Oddly enough, the most of them that are justified don't end in violence.
I don't care. Violence is wrong. I don't care if it's politically motivated, especially politically motivated. That's what the system is supposed to do. You vote out the people you don't like. And if your people don't win, then you don't blow other people up. I am just, I don't know. I don't think the last administration did anything to mend the wounds of a nation in chaos. I mean, what happened to that? Let's unite. But perhaps Trump and company will do a better job with law and order. Who knows? We haven't seen much yet. Thanks, panel, and thanks for watching.